1969. Something was flying over the Berkshires, flying over New Barrington, Sheffield, Connecticut, New York, Massachusetts. This something was a UFO. Hello, I'm Al Cooley, host of Ghosts in the Valley. Today we have part 3 of the Berkshires UFO that was recently released through Netflix on Unsolved Mysteries, episode number 5. Melanie Kirchdorfer was abducted, and her ordeal lasted all night. Melanie spent her whole life in turmoil, battling with her inner demons of what happened. And finally, 51 years later, Melanie can tell her story. But before we get into Melanie's story, when I interviewed Melanie the first time, for almost an hour, there were weird sounds, and it's hard to explain what was coming through the connection that we had. Near the end of the interview, everything on my end cut off. You see, Melanie possesses a lot of power and energy, and I'm assuming it's from the night she was abducted. She sets off car alarms. She can't go through radar scanners at the airport. Lights flicker. Her husband won't even allow her in his office for fear she will shut down his computer where all his files and work from his construction business is located. She sent me a video of herself standing next to a light just flickering from her power. It was on my second interview with Melanie I decided to do something a little different. Run her outside my system, almost like through an analog system, and then edit that and bring it back into the computer. For some reason, she can do other interviews with no problem. With me, there was definitely a high amount of energy. Not only did she shut down my computer, she took out the files of her episode. She took out my whole editing software I had to reinstall. I have a backup system. It's a recovering program that maybe I didn't save in case of a power failure. My backup system was missing. And as soon as this happened, Melanie called me and said, "Did I shut down the phone call?" I said, "Yes, you did more than that." So yes, Melanie still has issues from September 1st, 1969. So here is Melanie Kirchdorfer. Well, good afternoon, Melanie, and thank you for returning.
Well, good afternoon, and thank you for having me, Al.
And I explained all the glitches I had in the pre-show opening, so they know all about what happened.
Our little freak adventure.
Before we get into the abduction, probably overwhelmed with all the attention you've been getting the last few weeks from the Unsolved Mysteries series.
I wasn't expecting it, let me put it that way. I'm not getting as much attention as the guys are getting because I don't put anything out there. People are finding me, whereas they have Facebook pages about it. I don't have any Facebook pages about it. I have no book intentions or anything like that. So any contacts, people have contacted me, which it's fine. It's fine. I've actually enjoyed it. I've been working. Tom Reed has contacted me and asked me to do some shows, and he's really fun to work with. I've had fun working with him, which has been nice. So I never planned on doing this. It wasn't something that I planned on doing, but I've been enjoying it. The people that I've met have been lovely, very lovely people. So it's kind of a healing process for me because it was so traumatic for me. So this is my time for healing. That's how I look at it, because I've met so many kind people going through this process.
Yeah, I was talking to Tom Warner, and he was telling me how somebody had told him, "You're so lucky that, how did this happen to you?" And he says, no. At the time it's you're not lucky. I mean, something like that just, falls upon you like that. Are you the chosen one? Why me?
Well, Tom's a sweetheart too, and I'm very close with him as well. He's, we keep in contact constantly, Tom and I. He's like a brother to me, and We keep in touch during the week. We don't really talk about this anymore, though. We talk about other things, our families and such. Yeah, the whole thing's crazy. It's really crazy because I didn't know him as a little boy, but I know him better as an adult now. Our families know each other now, but we don't really talk about the whole UFO incident. We've become more immersed as family, I would say, than the UFO subject.
Yeah, by me talking to a few of the production assistants from the Unsolved Mystery crew that came and did your research and everything, they were telling me they knew it was going to be a hit, but they didn't know it was going to take off like it did.
Really?
They knew it was because they signed like I guess what I was told, a 6-part series. So there's another 6 parts coming, 6 episodes coming up, being released sometime this year. So when they threw in that UFO segment, episode 5, it was like, he says, one of their most watched programs ever. I figured you guys really, you might have got overnight success and not even known it,
I had no idea how big it is because I hear it from other people. I hear it from the 2 times, and then I hear it from my husband. He tells me about it. That's how I find out about it. But, or my sons will tell me about it. I personally don't hear about it because I don't post any of this on my own Facebook page. I guess I'm more private about it. And then the guys will tell me about it. That's how I find out about it, which it's interesting. I think that, the 2 times they're more, Tommy Warner, he's writing a book. I know that. So, that's probably why he has his page. This is his passion and also his painting. So it's really his passion. It's something that he's been doing. And Tom has the park that he's been working on for everybody. He's hoping to get the park together for everyone, not just him. My husband and I, we want to donate a picnic table for the park. So they have their passions and their reason. And I guess I'm just kind of dumbfounded over the whole situation because I haven't been thinking about it as long as them because of what had happened to me as a child. I was told not to talk about it and that it never happened and don't even think about it. Whereas they had a better support system than I had. So it's different for me. I really only had my sister. That's it.
Are you still in the area?
I'm in Stockbridge. It's just a town over. One town over.
Okay, is that in Berkshire County?
Oh, yeah. It's in the same school district, everything. It's generations, the same generation, same hospitals, same people.
And that's actually the same place where Jane Green seen the UFO to start the show out with.
Right. We have a lot of sightings here, too. Actually, my husband and the other time, we ran into someone. My husband ran into someone and said, "Oh, I saw Melanie on Netflix." And, that same night, I saw 6 UFOs that were heading in that same direction towards Glendale right before Jane Green saw it. I was in Stockbridge in the main street area, and it was heading right towards where Jane Green saw it that same night. He was just a kid. His family lived right on the main street of Stockbridge.
And, and since I talked to you last, been reaching out on Facebook and different groups, paranormal groups, and to try to contact more people that didn't come forward or, weren't part of the Netflix series. That, maybe there might be some other people that witnessed this. And I've been overwhelmed with responses from people who seen like 6 or 7 in a V formation. I was excited to get these emails, 51 years later.
Well, fortunately, my friend Patty, she lives on Cherry Street. I spoke to her today because a woman called me about a case that she heard about where a man disappeared in Michigan and then he showed up a year later in Great Barrington. And she would like to write a book about him, but he won't talk. He won't talk about it. My friend went to school with the relative of him. And my friend has photographs of 2 UFOs from Cherry Street. And this woman, this writer, asked if I would give her the telephone number of my friend. And I said I had to ask permission. And fortunately, my friend Patty is giving me permission for this woman to contact her. So it is hard to get people to come forward because people think you're crazy.
Exactly. Yes.
It took me 61 years before I got permission from my parents to come forward. And it wasn't even permission, really. It was a very bizarre situation, what happened. And people think you're crazy. They just don't. They tell you as a child that it's not happening, that it's all in your head. And you begin to believe it.
Right. I'll tell you one thing is, yeah, you're labeled crazy or you're out there. But on the other hand, which I found, I still believe, is a huge, huge cover-up from the government that doesn't want these things out there.
I believe that.
And I think that's why I'm being targeted a lot on a lot of my stuff being hacked into and missing. But I want to keep on putting it out. It's just virtually impossible to have an airport, an air traffic controller right near these things. And you can't tell me you see 7 UFOs over your base. It's just unbelievable to me.
Well, I think it's awful funny that the police department had nothing on it either that night.
And I've had calls coming in that say they left messages at the police department when they say they didn't have nothing. So why do I have people telling me they left a message? One lady even said she was even labeled like, "What are you drinking tonight?" So it's like you're already labeled, like you said, either crazy or drunk or on something, And so I can understand why a lot of people didn't come forward. I'm glad that you and Tom Warner and Tom Reed, Jane Green, y'all came forward to share your story.
And I have heard that swamp gas theory many times before, too. I've heard people say, "Oh, it's just swamp gas. It's just swamp gas." So Jane wasn't the first person that was told that before.
And growing up, have you witnessed anything like this before the abduction?
I've had them before, and then I had them again afterwards, yes. I did. As a child, I had them. It started when I was 4 years of age. When it happened, the 69 incident happened when I lived on 55 Castle Street in Great Barrington. But my first incident started on that I can remember. It could have happened when I lived on Cottage Street, thinking back now. I probably was 2 when I think back now. But I know for a fact in my mind, and from I told you that I had to go to a PTSD specialist for a couple of months, I would say 3 months. I went for PTSD therapy, and I know that it happened starting at 4 years of age. And what happened was there were these little gray men that would come into my room, particularly one. And I kept telling my parents, I kept telling them, and they would not believe me that this was happening. They would say that my brother had an imaginary friend. My sister saw it. She said that he looked like a troll. She saw him out in the tree. But he would come in my room and then just take me. It was so bad that my father, there was an attic in my room, because I would go up into the attic and I would be levitated up into the attic and then out the window and down through always the river, always the Housatonic River or water. A body of water was always involved. And my sister believed me. She would always know that it would happen because I'd always get back into bed with her when I'd finally get back. But my parents, the attic door was right in our bedroom. And finally, he put all these big locks, those bolt locks on my attic door. But it didn't matter because they could still get through it. And I found out after Netflix from a classmate of mine, the same thing was happening to her sister on a street over on Dresser Avenue. But her family believed her. Her parents believed her. And they moved to Stockbridge instead of Great Barrington. It did stop for her, but I think it's because she had the support system of her parents, where I didn't. So they wouldn't pay attention to me. They would just be angry with me.
I think that makes it tough as a child, to deal with that your parents don't believe you, and also dealing with the trauma that's happening.
Exactly. I mean, I actually got locked in the basement one night because of it. just to shut me up. My mother found me one night sleepwalking around. It must have been after an incident when they dropped me back off. And she's like, what are you doing? What are you doing? I don't remember her sleepwalking in her bedroom. She said, I just said, hi, Ma, hi. And then she walked me back into my room. But I have videotapes of being hypnotized, going through all of this, going back through this. Because I went to a PTSD specialist to find out exactly what happened. And you have to go for 4 weeks to prepare yourself for the trauma of what happened before they'll even hypnotize you for 4 to 6 weeks, however long. They have to prepare you for it, because some people cannot do it because you could have a nervous breakdown. It's so traumatic. It's like looking at a movie of your past life. So they have to know if you're going to be ready to see what you're going to see. Like I said, they work with soldiers and they work with police officers, rape victims. This man is himself. He was a soldier. I believe he was in the Marines that does this hypnosis work. And it's very serious what you have to do. And it's not a one-time thing. You know how people will go to have hypnosis done in a one-time thing. It's a series of things that you have to go through. And it's pretty amazing. I can remember the color of the bedspreads in my bedroom when I was 4 years old. I can remember songs that my sister and I were singing. My sister was like, I can't believe that you can remember all these things. And then she would remember when I would tell her. But it's pretty crazy. It was scary. And he wanted me to continue. But I found out enough. Enough was enough. Maybe in the future I'll go back and find out more. But it was very, very hard for me to do. And I did keep the tapes. It's frightening to watch them, but I have them. Like I said, maybe in the future I will continue to do it. But right now I know enough. It's just a really scary thing. My other incident I had was, I would say I was in my 40s. I still had an exchange student living with me. I used to be the American Intercultural Student Exchange person for this area. So I would place exchange students into other homes, and we always had exchange students here. And I remember one night there was a bright light around my house, so bright. And I'm like, oh my God, they're here again. I thought I was going to be too old by then for them to want anything. And I tried to wake everyone in the house up, even the animals. And I could not wake anyone up. No one. The cats, the dogs. I'm a big animal lover. And nobody would wake up. So I just climbed into bed and I pulled the covers over me. And I don't know what happened after that. It was like a fog. And then the next morning, I ran into a friend of mine. She's no longer with us either. I've lost a lot of friends at a very young age. And I said to her, April said to me, you look awful. What's wrong with you? And I said, I had a really weird night last night. And she goes, why? And I said, you're going to think I'm nuts. And I told her about the bright light. And she said, no, I don't think you're nuts at all. Because my husband and I went to a funeral. We were all outside. She said some people were having cigarettes outside at this funeral, and they looked up and there were some UFOs once again over Cherry Street. They went and reported it at the police station, and whatever police officer was working that night in Stockbridge said that there was a doctor on Cherry Hill, and I don't know which doctor because there's a couple of doctors that live on Cherry Hill, that had been watching them up on Cherry Hill for the past few years. So it has to be a hot spot because that's right about the area that Jane Green saw the UFO. It was pretty scary because apparently that's what's been happening right around this whole Stockbridge area. But I don't remember anything happening to me that night. I just remember the light, and that I couldn't wake anyone up that night.
We'll be right back with Melanie Kirchdorfer right after these messages.
Do you love a good story? If you do, check out Stories of Yore and Yours. I'm Sean Ennis, and each week on Stories of Yore and Yours, I narrate a classic short story, adding music and sound effects to bring those stories new life. The back catalog features stories by the likes of Edgar Allan Poe, Kurt Vonnegut, Rudyard Kipling, Mark Twain, Ray Bradbury, and many more. And in addition to classic short stories, I feature original stories by you, the listener. So if you do love a good story, give Stories of Yore, that's Y-O-R-E, and Yours, that's Y-O-U-R-S, a listen today. And visit the show at SYY Podcast on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram to submit your own stories, requests for classic short stories, or just to say hi. That's Stories of Yore and Yours, available wherever you get your podcasts.
So this is 51 years ago today that this incident happened. You want to lead us through the abduction?
Sure. First of all, I should probably tell you what happened, how I even came into this whole thing. What happened to me was I was told that it didn't really happen by my parents. And ironically, I found out from Tom Reed that my mom had been contacted in 2013, and she'd been going back and forth with people in Oregon about this whole thing, but she'd been telling me that this never took place. I mean, I was like, really, Mom? This never took place? And I dreamt this, just like I dreamt about the little gray men? Oh, yeah, she said, this is just a figment of your imagination. And I'm like, I don't think so, Mom, but she kept telling me that it was. And then about 2 years ago, now, mind you, she'd been speaking to people since 2013. So 2 years ago, I get a phone call and she tells me, she's in her 80s now. She tells me, I think you really need to come forward and go to the Historical Society and tell them what happened to us that night up at Lake Mansfield. And I'm like, what are you talking about? You told me that was all in my head. No, it really did happen. I just didn't want people to think you were nuts. And I'm like, are you kidding me? I said, well, I can't do anything right now. I have to find myself first after what you did to me, Mom. I was very upset about all that. That being said, I spent a year in counseling before I came forward. And in the meantime, I had run into Tommy Warner. And I didn't know him before then.
Yeah, he said he mentioned he's seen you on the craft.
Yeah, and I don't remember seeing Tommy, but I remember I ran into him at the Big Y right after I had spoken to my mom. And I knew him immediately when I saw him. It's like our eyes connected, and he was like my long-lost brother. It was weird. And then I saw that he was writing this book. I didn't even know how we became friends on Facebook. I thought my husband was a friend of his because my husband knew everyone in high school. I wasn't someone that was out there in high school. I was in the art department. I really hung out with a very young art teacher. She was fresh out of college. She was a friend of mine. I was a senior. I had 2 other girlfriends that were in the art department. We were very close, but that was it. I didn't hang out with the cheerleading group and all that. I was very much into the arts. So that being said, I really thought he was my husband's friend. I saw that he was writing this book about UFOs, and my husband is very much into watching those shows, which I could never watch before because I was so afraid to watch them, because of everything that happened to me as a child. And then again, as I got older. So I couldn't watch them before. And I thought, okay, well, I'll contact Tommy Warner and I'll ask him if, when the book comes out, if I can buy one for my husband. So I private messaged him and he said, can I call you? And I said, of course you can call me. This was after I had seen him at the Big Y. He called me up and he goes, you were there. And I knew I was there, but I didn't know that he was there because I hadn't seen him on this. And I didn't know that's what his book was about. And I was like, I got goosebumps when he told me that because I didn't know his story. I didn't know about the whole Netflix thing. I had no idea of what he was going to tell me. He said, "Can I come over and talk to you and your husband?" And I'm like, "Yeah." And I'm like, "This is crazy. I got my mother telling me something." And this I was told not to talk about my whole life.
And now you're put on the spotlight.
Yeah. And it's like my sister, my husband, this PTSD specialist, and Tom Warner and, Tom Reed, and these people they've really come forward, and they've made it so I can actually watch a UFO film now and not freak out about it. I'm actually starting to be able to sleep better now. I used to sleep sitting up straight up. I find myself now in the morning, I'm almost sleeping laying down now, not all the way down, but further down. It's getting better. It's getting a little bit easier now. Tom Reed said to me, "We're alive. We're alive. Nothing really, really horrible happened to us. They didn't take everything away from us." And I thought, he's right. He's really right. It's sad. It really hurts my feelings what my parents did to me. That part makes me really sad that my relationship is severed. But other than that, we're okay.
According to the Netflix show, you went out for ice cream.
What happened was my sister and I, we had to work that weekend. We worked all weekend long. I was 12. Janie was 14. I can still see the posters that were hanging up. It was Cactus Flower, Goldie Hawn was playing back then, and we cleaned the Mahawi Theater. Two little girls cleaning the Mahawi Theater, but we were actually preteens and a teenager, and we weren't these innocent little girls. I shouldn't make it sound like that. We were wild preteens, and we really wanted to just go out and smoke a cigarette. We didn't want to go hang out and go have ice cream. There was this rock called Penny Rock that we used to hang out at. We had a girlfriend whose mom smoked. We wanted to meet her at Penny Rock and go smoke cigarettes. That's what we wanted to do. And our parents insisted that we go for ice cream. So we got in the car. We went up for ice cream. We were sitting in the back seat. I can still remember smelling wool when we saw this thing. It was like all of a sudden we looked up and my father said, "Holy shit." And there was this bright, bright red orange glow over the lake. I mean, it was huge and it was just there. And it was like there. And my father starts the car up and we start screaming. And I knew it was coming from me. I knew it. I just knew it because they were always coming from me when I was little. And I'm like, "No, Dad, no." And we were screaming and my mother's going, "No, Joey, don't. And he wanted to follow it and started chasing it. And I remember smelling great, like this wool smell. And I asked my mom, why did I smell wool? Why was there a smell of wool? And she told me that it was because my dad's blanket, he had a gray army blanket in the back seat of the car. And my sister and I, we were in the back seat of the car. My brother was back there too. And we had our heads down screaming in the back seat of the car. So I must have been smelling that wool army blanket when I was screaming and crying. And then the next thing I can remember is being over Berkshire Heights, levitating. And when you levitate like that, when they do that to you, you can't move. It's just your eyes that are moving. It's just your eyes. You're stuck. And I remember being stuck there. And then my next memory is being on the craft. I only remember myself being in a room. It was like a metallic room. And I don't remember anyone else being in that room, just myself. And then my next memory is being in another room with other children. And then they would just disappear. One newspaper quoted me saying that they were classmates of mine. They were not classmates of mine. I never said that they were classmates of mine. I don't know who those children were. I had never seen them before. Tom said he saw me there, but I didn't know who Tom was. But there were definitely other children there, and then they would just vanish. Boom, boom. And then I woke up on Lake Mansfield, and I had horrible stomach pains. My family was gone, and I remember I was wearing short cutoff jeans and a lime green shirt, 3/4 length sleeves. I remember that because I loved that shirt. I didn't want to let it go. You know, hey, you have a favorite sweater? That was my favorite sweatshirt. And bare feet, and I had to walk home. It was like a 5 or 10 minute walk home on a dirt road, and the sun wasn't quite up yet, but it was starting to come up. And I don't know what time it was because I didn't have a watch on, but it was definitely before. It's like early in the morning when the birds are just going to start to chirp.
So the abduction probably took all night then.
For me, it was an all-night thing for sure. Yes. And my parents, I said to my sister, well, how did you guys get home? And she goes, Mom and I, we go over it and over it again, and we don't even remember driving home. We have no idea. She's there. I remember when you came home and you and I talking about it. My mom always locks the door. She's so anal about locking the doors. She's so afraid. She thinks that everyone is going to break into her house. I mean, I never lock my doors, but she always locks her doors, and she's so frightened. But that night or that morning when I came home, her back door was unlocked, and she never would do that. But I remember I walked up and everybody was sound asleep still. And I remember waking my sister up and climbing into bed with her, because I always slept with my sister because I was so afraid, always afraid. But Janie and I, we always looked out that window, and we always would watch UFOs. We still talk about it to this day. We would always watch UFOs over East Mountain. There's a lot that would be over at East Mountain. We still talk about that. They didn't bother me as much as I got older as they did when I was little. Once I was at the Castle Street house, except for that night. It was a bad night, but we used to watch them all the time there, Jane and I.
Do not go anywhere. We'll be back with the conclusion of Melanie Kirchdorfer. Are you shopping to find your thing? Is your thing stickers, t-shirts, posters? Is your thing wall art, clothing, home and living, phone cases? Are you shopping for your kids and babies? How about stationery? Many other gifts. You can find all these at Redbubble, redbubble.com. Get the app and save 20% at redbubble.com. Find your thing. Click on the link in the show notes. That's Redbubble, redbubble.com.
So you think you were then targeted when the selected few was abducted?
I believe that I was, for sure. Definitely, I believe that I was. And I believe that my son has had some experiences as well, my youngest.
Yeah, my notes here I had said I couldn't remember that town in New York. It was Hillsdale, New York.
Hillsdale's right. You go into Egremont, which is the next town from Great Barrington, and then Hillsdale is the next town from Egremont.
Yeah, because I had one from Hillsdale, one from Stockbridge, and one from Sheffield.
It's definitely a hot spot here. And I was told that it could be because we have a lot of limestone, and because of General Electric.
Right. Do you think that those kids you've seen that were disappearing one by one on the craft, do you think they know something today? They never came forward.
Absolutely. It could have been any of my friends that I've spoken to. I've had people that have called me, a young girl. Well, she's not so young anymore. None of us are young anymore. I have to laugh. I mean, when I talk about it, I think I'm 12 years old again. I'm right back in that place. But I had a girl call me who was much younger than me. A lot of people have found me because of my husband's website, because I privatized everything after this happened, thinking, oh God, I don't want anyone calling me. But actually I do, after, I did somebody asked me to do a show, and then I actually felt better talking about it after I did talk about it. And anyways, this girl called and left a message on my husband's machine. And she goes, I remember Melanie. Could you please ask her if she wouldn't mind calling me, if she remembers me? I was much younger than her, but I remember her. She worked it out of hand. And my brother had a horrible experience on Berkshire Heights in 1970. And he's never gotten over it. Would you please ask her to call me? And just because of some of the comments that she made, I remembered her. But if she hadn't said the comments, I didn't recognize her name. So I did call her back because of the comments. And one of them was the Berkshire Heights, because that's where I was stuck in my levitation. And there's no way she could have known that, because no one knew that information about me. And the same thing had happened to her brother on Berkshire Heights, which is bizarre. And that's before I'd even talked to him, spoken to him. So he had the same experience a year later, 1970, up at Berkshire Heights. And that poor young man had never, ever gotten over it. He's totally traumatized by it, and he will not speak to anyone. He'll talk to me about it. He'll talk to his sisters about it, but he's so frightened about it still to this day.
Yeah, I would imagine that, that's a traumatic experience. First of all, even seeing a UFO. I listened to an interview by Marcus Clark, and he said that you guys were really courageous for coming forward, because what it did, it will open up doors for others to come forward.
And people are coming forward, too.
But what's amazing to me is people don't want to give their name. I mean, about the event, but don't want their name mentioned. And that's okay. I mean, because I have a lot that I understand whatever position they're in, job-wise or family-wise, don't want their name out there.
I think more and more people are becoming relaxed. I think I might even be able to get that guy in the future to talk about it, because his sister calls me now almost every Sunday, and they want to come and visit me. They want to come back here once the whole CV-19 thing is over. And I think if he sees that I'm okay now, and I have a good support system now, and with the whole park that Tom is trying to do as a whole healing adventure for all of us, maybe he'll see that having a support system will be there for him, and he's not alone. He wasn't the only one that had to go through this. It was horrible for everyone. It's not something that was a glorifying adventure. None of us look at it that, oh, wow, this was cool. It wasn't cool. This is not cool.
And I think that's what Tom Warner was trying to put out there, that, to the one person, none of he's interviewed or asked by someone, how lucky you were to be, and he says, no, that's not, he wouldn't use that word at all.
No. Mm-mm.
But I was looking at some research I've been doing, in 2019, there was over 6,000 sightings last year, UFO sightings.
I'm afraid to go outside and look up at the sky. I really am. My husband will say to me, come on, let's go for a hike out in the woods. And why don't you just go out there and sit on the rock and call them down here? Because you can do that, And I always said, no, I'm not going to do that. Are you kidding me? You know how they just recently had this thing, it was on Facebook, that you can call them down just recently. Did you see that?
Yes.
And he was begging me to go do that. And I said, absolutely not. Are you crazy? I'm not going to do that for you.
Right.
Begging me. And I said, no, I am not going to do that, because this is not fun.
Mm-hmm.
You have no idea. This is not fun. It's not something you want to do. And you're playing with fire. And I said, I'm not going to partake in that. This is not a fun thing to do. So I refused to do it.
The silence. There's no noise coming from this craft. From 1952 to 1969, that's 94, 98, there's no sound. Could you verify that while you were on a craft? There was no sound?
I couldn't hear anything. I could hear like a hum. There was like a slight humming, and I remember a coolness. There's like a coolness. But when you say there's no sound, it's almost like everything, I don't know how to explain it. It's almost like everything that you're hearing, though, is in your head. It's almost like a mental telepathy thing. It's not like you're hearing stuff outside, like you and I would hear things, but you're hearing things almost as if you have headphones on. So there's noises happening, but they're all happening inside your head. Or if you're have you ever had an MRI done, or where they put things on you? It's almost that type of a sound. But then it stops and there's silence.
And that's what I was talking to one of my friends who was involved in one of these chases of a UFO because he's a police officer. He kind of said the same thing, that there's complete silence, but there's like a slight hum. At some points, it would magnify the senses around you. Like he said, it was hard to explain. Like you could almost smell the flowers in the field, hear crickets chirping really loud. Then it would be complete silence.
It's hard to explain it. It's bizarre.
So you don't have any books, any plans?
I'm not a writer. No, I'm a painter. I just paint. I don't paint pictures of UFOs. I paint landscapes, flowers, my cats, my dogs. I don't paint UFOs either. No. People keep saying, why don't you write a book? Why don't you write a book? Your whole life has been interesting. At least do a journal for your grandchildren. But I'm not a writer. I am not a writer.
You know, I do find a lot of things are tied in with the American Native Indian. It's really cool when I reach out to different people like yourself, and I always say, oh, I got to put Berkshires on my bucket list, you know.
Well, you would love it here. We've got the Indian burial ground here, and my friend Emma Eastman, my Dakota friend, the elder, he came and stayed with me after I went out to South Dakota, and I showed him around. And he did a blessing on my other house that's in Stockbridge. And it's really pretty incredible. In fact, I think I started to tell you that when I started doing some research, because my mother kept telling me that those little gray men were all in my head, I started thinking, well, maybe they were the little people, because I don't know if you've done research on the little people. They were the helpers. They were probably midgets they are midgets that are born into the tribes of the Native Americans. And they were some of them were shaman, or they were just the helpers of the Native Americans. So I started looking into them thinking, well, maybe these were ghosts of the Native Americans from King Philip's War, and they were killed along the Housatonic River because the Great Wigwam was where the Congo Church was. So I started researching that and King Philip's War, but it didn't add up because they didn't look like that. They definitely didn't look like that. They were the Greys. So that's what got my interest in Native American history, and that's what brought me out to South Dakota. So I did a lot of research. Everything that happened for a reason, because I did a lot of learning about the First Nations people because of it. So everything happens for a reason. I'm not sorry that it happened because I've met a lot of great people, and it took me on some good travels trying to find out what happened.
Almost everybody I talk to, I get a very interesting, history lesson or something I didn't, I'm always learning from different UFOs or ghost stories, so it's always interesting.
Of course, for sure. Well, it even took me into the travels to go down to the Mayan ruins, which I know there's a connection there with the UFO phenomena too. It's just so interesting to see the drawings on the walls. And a friend of mine in Belize, they claim that they see UFOs down there all the time. So there's a connection for sure. I don't know so much that they want to harm us or hurt us. I don't think that they intentionally want to harm us. I think they're more concerned about what we're doing to the earth. And at the same time, I do question, though, if our government isn't involved in it as well. I have questions. I have a lot of questions.
Well, Melanie, I really thank you for your time and your stories. And I know it's been crazy since the Netflix. I was glad to contact you and happy you got back with me, along with the other two Toms and some other people that I've contacted through my research. It takes a lot to come out and tell your story, what you witnessed and experienced.
Thank you, Al. I've enjoyed it. And I've also enjoyed a lot of the story that you sent me. I loved the other day, by the way. I really enjoyed that story.
Thank you, Melanie, for that fantastic interview. It takes a lot. Open up your old wounds and share your story of 51 years ago. Talking with Marcus Clark, the director of the Unsolved Mysteries Berkshires UFO, we were talking about scenes that were left out and things he wished would have been kept in the episode. And he did mention there was a lot on you he wished they would have kept in. And he didn't cut it out. It wasn't him. It wasn't his decision to cut out any scenes of the Berkshires UFO. And I know Tom Reed was upset on some of the documents and the park that were left out of his segment. There's others that was left out as well. Marcus said that, parts that were left out he wished were kept in, and yours was one of them. Melanie is not writing a book. She doesn't really have anything to benefit from this podcast. She wasn't paid by me, by Netflix, by Unsolved Mysteries. So she's really not gaining anything by these interviews, just to share her story. Melanie's husband, he has a construction business. So I'm going to reach out to all of you, especially in the Berkshire area, Massachusetts, in Stockbridge. Henry H. Kirchdorfer III has been renovating houses. His construction company has an A+ rating with the Better Business Bureau. So if you need an addition added on, if you want to rebuild your home and give it that historical look, Henry H. Kirchdorfer III can do it for you. I'm going to leave his number, his email, and his website in the show notes. Again, thank you, Melanie. It was my pleasure to have you on the show today. Next week, I will be talking with Doug Sackman. Doug was the special effects and art director of the Unsolved Mysteries Berkshires UFO. Doug Sackman. I'm your host, Al Cooley. We'll see you next week on Ghosts in the Valley.
Podcast Network.